Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and these guys have entire armies of nerds who are sitting there designing these apps to hijack your brain. When you do something that's pleasurable, your brain releases a hit of dopamine. To get a dopamine hit, our caveman ancestors had to do something really big. They had to, find a mate, kill a saber-toothed tiger, something like that. So our brains evolved to make a beeline to our next source of it. Now, we have a source of it right here in our pocket.
This episode is brought to you by the Arts Council for Monterey County. What makes life feel real? It's expressing yourself, finding your people, and using art to heal, grow, and be heard. The Arts Council for Monterey County, Arts for MC, believes the arts benefit everyone. They bring art into schools, community centers, and public spaces, and support students with scholarships, workshops, and programs like Poetry Out Loud and Youth Poet Laureate. Whether you're an artist or just looking to be inspired, your journey starts here. Learn more at arts4mc.org. That's arts, the number 4, mc.org. And remember, they're also proud sponsors of this podcast. So thank you to the Arts Council for Monterey County. What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Offline Expression. Man, it's a gorgeous day. I'm happy to be here with you guys. My name is Jeff Hinderscheid. I'm your host, and we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Victoria is not with us today. You all know why. I feel like every time I hear the intro to my spiel here, everybody hears the exact same thing. So I'm not even going to tell you that she's in school and that we're supporting her in doing that. But, of course, as always, we have an amazing guest with us today. We have Matt Johnson here with us. Matt, say hello to the people.
Hello. Good to be here.
Perfect. And you know what? Matt is joining us from San Diego, which means we are in the same time zone, and that has become kind of rare. I've had some really awesome expanded opportunities to talk to people in Australia and the East Coast and all these places, and it's almost rare now to ask somebody who's actually in California where we are. So welcome, Matt. How's the weather down in sunny San Diego?
Oh, it is 75 and gorgeous, just like most days. We're really blessed here. We have the perfect weather.
Oh, man. I know. Like I was saying a little bit before we started recording or whatnot, I have very close friends that live in San Diego, Mira Mesa, and over in Fallbrook, and man, I don't get to visit them enough, but when I do, I'm always going, man, why am I not living in San Diego? That's the question. It's so gorgeous.
The price.
It's huge. Yeah, the price, right? Well, you know what? It's funny. I live in an agricultural area, but it's still Monterey County. So even though I'm in the south part of the county, it's starting to creep up there and become just as expensive as anywhere else, I guess. But yeah, that's par for the course when you're in California, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate you joining us on the show today. So, Matt, without further ado, here's what I want to do. I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to all of our listeners. Tell them who you are, what you do, and a little bit of, why it's important to you. And then we'll get into some backstory about how you kind of took the path to lead you there.
Okay, yeah, I'm Matt Johnson. I am a hypnotist and a NLP coach. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, which basically I help people take control of the operating system of their brain, if you will. By the time you hit 30 years old, up to 95% of all your day-to-day behaviors are driven by your subconscious mind. And if that sounds strange, think back to the first time you ever drove a car. Your hands were 10 and 2 and you were, hyper focused on not hitting anything. You had to be. Fast forward a few years and you've got coffee in one hand, cell phone in the other. I'm kidding. Please don't do that. But, that shows the process. Most of us have had the experience of driving and realizing we haven't even been paying attention. Now, how did you not crash? It's because your subconscious learned how to drive through repetition. That's the process. Very cool for driving, but problems can happen when we teach it to do things that we don't want. Bad habits, limiting beliefs, negative emotions, things like that. When you get those kinds of programs stuck down in there, that's when you need subconscious tools to go in and rewrite those programs. Your subconscious works exactly like a computer. It does not think. It just runs whatever is programmed into it. And so, hypnosis and NLP are the ultimate toolkit for going in, rewriting those and making them into what you want.
Yep. Like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get along really great here, Matt. I am obsessed with so many of the things you just said. Um,
Okay. Oh, cool. Good. This is gonna be a good conversation then. Yeah.
that's right. Well, one of them right out of the gate that always I say it to college students and high schoolers, but mostly college students. It's you're not as good at multitasking as you think you are.
Right.
Multitasking, your brain has to refocus on each individual thing. It's not focused on two things at once. That's not the same deal. It's either focused on one thing and the other thing is just happening subconsciously, like chewing gum and watching TV. You don't actually have to think about chewing the gum. But when you're in a car and, going right into what you were saying, you learn how to do it. At first, it's a fluid intelligence, and then it becomes crystallized where it's like something you can do pretty much anytime. You could jump in and start a car. But the difference is the environment around which you're driving said car changes every single time. So if you are in a place, if you're in a place where your car has a new environment, there's a storm, there's rain or something, you know what? You don't have control over that. Just because you know how to drive a car doesn't mean the environmental factors around you haven't shifted or changed and are unique to that situation and moment. Therefore, you cannot shift your focus from that to something that takes 100% of your attention, like a screen. So I'm with you 100% on that, because the digital stuff is the problem in a lot of ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of those things you mentioned, like, if you're in the middle of a storm or something like that, new environment, right? So it requires your conscious attention. Here's the thing about, any kind of, phone, screen, anything like that, it takes in so much of your attention. I will not look at my phone while I'm driving. I don't care. I've gotten griped at for the, not answering texts. It's like, hey, I'm not going to crash my car, but, so I can answer your text 5 minutes faster. You know what I mean? It's just, that's stupid. But it's as far as multitasking. Women, because of the way their brains are wired, tend to do it a little bit better than men do. It's a wiring thing, but there's always a cost. There's always some kind of switching that, but again, if it's something that your subconscious can handle on its own, like chewing gum or whatnot, then you can absolutely do it because, very low cognitive load, and you don't have to think about chewing gum. If it's, I will pair, a low cognitive load with a higher one, when I need to get something done. But when 2 things require conscious attention, you are much better off in 99% of cases, just finish one and then get to the other. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. And you know what? When you were introducing yourself, you mentioned something about, can you repeat the statistic you said about 90%, 30 years old? There was something you said there. What was that?
Right. Up to 95% of all your day-to-day behaviors are driven by your subconscious mind. That's that automatic programming. You get up, you brush your teeth, you jump in the shower, you drive to work, you can do that all on autopilot. That's, when that happens, today is gonna be just like yesterday, tomorrow will likely be just like today, and that's where we get into, our lives can kinda, get stale or, in a rut depending on where we are, or if your life is magical, it'll stay that way, but,
Right.
it's
Yeah. And I'm very curious to hear more about your processes and what you do. But one of the things that you just said that I think is kind of aligned with the things that I do with my students and clients is I talk to them a little bit about how those things that you're mentioning, we forget to give ourselves some credit for those. And so if you're struggling with anxiety or depression or things like that, a good place to start is to write down every single productive thing you've done, no matter how small, and you'll start to see how much you've done. So you go, okay, I got out of
yes.
bed. I brushed my teeth. I ate breakfast. I got dressed. I put my shoes on. I drove to work. Like those things are subconscious, but when you really stop and think about them, you can start to build a little bit of your own confidence and self-esteem back by going, I've done a lot today. Maybe I didn't go to the bank like I needed to or call grandma or whatever, but I have done stuff. It's not like I haven't done anything. And I think it's important to bring those things out of the subconscious sometimes and give yourself a little bit of credit and grace for those.
Absolutely, and, I'm not picking on the ladies here, I promise, but I'm gonna bring up one more thing. When we look in the mirror, all of us do this, but, when we look in the mirror, we can see, a beautiful face, but focus on the one tiny little flaw that, that 1% of it that, that's got 100% of your attention. We kinda do the same things with ourselves. It's like, I've made all this progress, but I dismiss it. I'm gonna focus on this one little thing that I said I was gonna do, but I didn't. You know what I mean? Um, that is a great process for bringing, the making the unconscious conscious, which is a big part of what I do. And when you do that, you take that inventory of, all right, where am I? Where do I want to be? The last thing you want to do is beat yourself up. Just no good will ever come of that. You're just gonna, you put yourself through, a meat grinder basically, and all that does is kill your momentum. All you want to do is, just from a detached point of view, all right, here's where I am, here's where I want to be, and how, what's my plan for getting there? Um, I'll tell you a quick story about, it'll explain my approach to this. Every year I go to the gym, and, I see, the first week of January, the gym's absolutely packed. You can't even get a parking spot. And by the second week, it's about halfway cleared out. By the third week, it's back to normal. Now, why do so many people give up on those New Year's resolutions 2 weeks into a 52-week year? All right, most of us take the approach of, I'm going to starve myself and work out 6 hours a day. You know what I mean? Which I would probably stick with that for a day or two. But
It's not
that
sustainable.
was,
Yeah, no, no, no.
yeah, the way you want to build progress and just about anything is you want to do tiny little 2 millimeter shifts every day. If you're intimidated about going to the gym, I use that as an example. Maybe just, drive in there and swipe your card the first day. Maybe day two, you try out a machine or something, but just little tiny steps, every single day. It's not about what you can do in one day. It's about what you do every day, what you do consistently, what habits you build. And, if you improve 1% a day, at the end of a year, that's not 365%. That 1% will keep compounding over and over again. By the end of the year, that is 3,700%. That's 37 times improvement at the end of 1 year, just doing that 1% improvement per day, every day. So it's not about going in and, crushing it every day. It's about being stubborn enough to get yourself in, or to get yourself to do what it is you got to do every single day, no matter what. That's the biggest thing.
That is fantastic, man. I love that. I had a amazing regional manager when I was working down in Southern California. I was in Newport Beach for a long, long time, and um, this manager said, "We don't want to be 100% better than our competition because then our competition's not very good. We want to be 1% better in 100 different ways," and that has always stuck
Yeah.
with me. And what you're talking about is very similar because it's not about going and crushing it. That's not sustainable because you blow all your energy and you're like, I can't do this. And you probably can't. It's too fast, too much, too fast, unless you have like
Right.
drill sergeant. Like, there's a reason why military, NFL football, there's certain groups where it's like you go into it and the first 3 weeks are hell, right? Well, those first couple of days, a lot of people quit. It's just too much and all this, that, and the other. But that's not really sustainable. And it's not, that's why there's only two examples I can come up with, right? But 1%, I mean, that is another really great way to give yourself grace because you go,
Yeah.
hey, I drove there. And like you said, maybe you drive there and you swipe your card the first day and the next day you do one machine. What's really sticking is the habit change in the subconscious. I drove there.
Yeah.
And now the process
Yeah.
of getting ready and driving there starts to become the sticky part that you're not even paying as much attention to. It's not even about the gym now. Now it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's 10 a.m. I got to go. I got to get ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another part to that that makes it a lot easier. I call it fun gets done. If you can find a way to associate some level of pleasure to it in some way, like, there was a point in time, my kids were small. I was working full time, trying to launch a business on the side. And The only time I could go to the gym was by getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that was not easy to do, but I did 2 things. I'm a Tony Robbins fan, he's had a huge impact on me, and so I always had Tony in my ears, and, I'm also a big basketball, fan, played in high school and all that. I, uh, I always ended my workouts by 10 minutes to shooting hoops, and that way, when the alarm went off and in 6 years, I can count on one hand the number of workouts that I missed. 5, 6 days a week, constant, and yeah, I mean, it was, those 2 combinations, 2 millimeters plus fun gets done I is what did it for me, but, um, when that alarm went off at 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't think I ever once wanted to get out. I had to flash on that picture of, "All right, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna, I'm gonna feed my mind. I'm gonna get to shoot some hoops. All right, let's get up." You know what I mean? And it greased the skids so much. So it's again, that's a lot of what I do is just helping you take control of those processes, how your brain works, and make it into what you want.
Yep. And first of all, mad props to you for 4 a.m. wake ups because I think we've all been through stuff like that is really, really hard like that. And there's always people that could say, I could never do that. And, you're already telling yourself you can't do something. So there's a whole other piece to that, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the generalization of it, but the fun gets done. The fun it gets done is a great little catchphrase for that stuff. And you're right. And sometimes it's, in an educational standpoint, I'll tell kids, don't study for 3 hours and cram. It's not sustainable. It doesn't help you. It makes you not like school. We like to feel successful and productive. So set yourself a timer for 1 hour. And when the timer goes off, close that book, walk away, and then reward yourself. Do something. Get yourself a coffee or, whatever it is. Reward yourself for that hour. And then in 1 week, that's 7 hours of studying you just put in, and it doesn't feel that bad. And it goes back to what you said also about bite-sized pieces, little pieces. But fun gets done, reward yourself and take it in bite size, and you're actually way more productive over time than if you try to do the cram thing right at the end or, pump iron every day for 3 weeks in the first part of January and go, oh, forget this.
Yeah.
So how does
And
it
if you
work?
think about
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
if you think I think I answered your question of, if you think about, adults do that too, here in the States, January 14th, or not, April 14th, taxes come due and, it's, so many of us are lined up at the post office
File
to,
extensions or get it all
why
in.
did we wait months to do it? We had all our stuff. All right, what changed April the 14th? It was that mental movie you play in your head. It's up until that point, when you think about doing your taxes, it's painful, right? It's like, I don't feel like doing that. I'll do it tomorrow. You know what I mean? But tomorrow doesn't come until the 14th. What happens on that day? You change that mental move. It's like, oh, all of a sudden, not getting your taxes done means, oh, I'm going to have to pay penalties to the IRS. I
No
don't want
more
to give
games
them any
on.
more than my money. Yeah. And so that mental movie changes. And what becomes painful to you will, it gets you into action versus, procrastinating, putting it off. That works for just about anything. Anything we do is out of either, we want to gain pleasure or avoid pain. Now, about 80% of us are going to be what's called away from pain people. That does not mean you're a negative person. That just means you have an away from pain strategy. And that's totally fine. It's kind of like being right-handed or left-handed. That's just the way you're wired. The way you want to organize it, in either case. Um, you want to have enough, some, like I mentioned, that picture that got me out of bed. Um, you want to have the negative picture. What's the most catastrophic thing I can think of that's going to happen if I don't follow through on what I said I was going to? You know what I mean? And you can flash that picture, light a fire under yourself, but you don't want to stay there because then you're going to be negative all day. So you want to have that positive picture that you can flip to as soon as you get that fire lit. You're motivated. you can flip to the positive picture to keep yourself in a good mood and keep going. The thing about, having away from pain strategy, and I'm one of these. I'm an away from pain person, but there's nothing wrong with our culture has a thing that says you're supposed to be positive and all this. That those are two different things. I'm a very positive person, but I'm also an away from pain strategy. But when you flip those, you get the best of both worlds. But when you're an away from pain person like I am, what happens is when you get that fire lit and you get to work, you get far enough away from that pain, then all of a sudden that desire will diminish. You're halfway to your goal, and all of a sudden you're good. You're like, all right, this isn't too bad. I'm not feeling the pain anymore. I'm just going to sit here. So you get stuck at no man's land. That's why you need the positive picture to flip to.
Yeah, because that's the pull to the other side, right? So you can get halfway there because you're running away from this, but to get to here, you need something to pull you to the other side, right?
Right. Get you to the finish line. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. And away from pain, I mean, that that seems so obvious or trite in some ways, but it's so much deeper than that because what we know, I mean, if we're really going to go into the world of like Freud and everything else, we know that there's all kinds of subconscious and unconscious things going on that um, create defense mechanisms and self preservation modes that happened way before we had really a lot of say in it. And then it was doubled
Right.
down on throughout different experiences. And so, whether you are or you aren't, that's not a negative thing. Like you said, it doesn't mean that you're this way or that it's even a choice. You may have that may just be how you're wired, like you had said earlier. And if that's how you are, knowing is half the battle. I know that's a saying, but it really
Yeah.
is. It's called self-awareness because it's awareness of yourself and knowing those things about you. Man, that's pretty enlightening.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing how you're wired is a big part of, being, successful and, becoming the person you want to be, doing what you want to do, all that. If you're, uh, one of my, mentors in the hypnosis world of, Milton Erickson, who a pioneer, brilliant hypnotist. He was educating hypnotists, and he said, your clients are your clients because they're out of rapport with their unconscious mind. And there's so much truth in that. It's, when it's just, again, it's that awareness, of, how am I wired? What are these patterns that I'm running, whatnot? And when you have that, yeah, the game's halfway done.
Wow, yeah, that I love statements like that that really just kind of shine a light on all of it. They capture everything in like a nice snapshot. That
Yeah,
is well
yeah,
said. So here a couple things, Matt. So first of all, our podcast is about kind of this big shift in society these days with the world of social media and the digital age and the tremendous spike that we've seen in mental health symptoms for young people and people in their early 20s and this generation that has now been raised with blue light in front of their eyes all day. We're seeing this failure to launch. We're seeing this overwhelming impact on their personality development and their social abilities because of the constant fragmented attention that comes from comparison to everything all the time. Yet
yes.
we as a society are kind of just caught up in that. We don't see it as an epidemic yet, but it's coming. So, my first question is A, in your practice and all the things that you're doing, are you seeing a lot of clients with this kind of thing and all that? And B, is it different with your approach when you're working with them versus any other sort of mental illness or situations or whatever? And what can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. That is it. It is such a huge epidemic, and I think it's going to be one of those that we're not going to really react to it until it turns into a crisis. We're kind of sleepwalking into it, in my opinion. What happens is, back in the 1980s, the average attention span was like 20 minutes. Today, it's about 7 seconds. A goldfish can do 9. There was a study that actually measured this out, but I call it TikTok brain, but, what happens is when you do something that's pleasurable, your brain releases a hit of dopamine, which is just, the pleasure chemical. It's a morphine-like chemical. It's natural in your brain. To to get a dopamine hit, our caveman ancestors had to do something really big. They had to, find a mate, kill a saber-toothed tiger, something like that. So our brains evolved to make a beeline to our next source of it. Um, Now we have a source of it right here in our pocket. You know what I mean? And that is and when you realize that, Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and these guys have entire armies of nerds who are sitting there designing these apps to hijack your brain and, make you addicted to dopamine is you can get addicted to that just like any other chemical. And, if you feel lethargic or slow or tired or you're not going after your goals the way you know you should, the reason is probably, something, is pulling you in another direction.
It's not a never-ending supply. It has to rebuild. And when you're constantly sucking it down to the empty, your car won't run when you're out of gas. It's literally the same thing, but you're still going and seeking it, which is you're still trying to get your car to go. It literally can't, and you're not sure why. And you're right. When it becomes a crisis, which we're close, by the way, I
Yeah.
think. I mean, there's a lot of movement on this, but yes, it is completely hijacked. You call it TikTok brain. I say anti-social media. I know what you mean. Yeah. So what happens? People get to the bottom, and how do we see that present itself, and what can we do?
What happens is, like with any drug, you talk to any drug addict and they, and in the beginning, they get that high and it feels good and it gets a little bit less, and they get to the point where they got to take the drug to feel normal, right? And what happens is the actual receptors on the cell for the dopamine will downregulate. So you need more of it to get that same effect, which makes the receptors downregulate even more. And so that's when you get to that, kind of depressed, lethargic type feeling where, you almost feel disgust to look at your phone, but you got to do it. I play I have a course where, part of it is one of the very first modules is helping people get over social media because I knew they would not finish the course until they did.
Oh my gosh,
But
brilliant.
I put that one right in the front. Yeah, brilliant. I have, I do a little description of this, but I play that little ding that you get on your phone and you go ding, 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 ding. And I'll play it a dozen times in about, 10 seconds. And when you hear that and you feel that urge come up in you, you get anxious. You feel like, oh my God, I got to check my phone. And then I'm sitting there, just messing with you the whole time. You feel nervous there. What's going on? Better check your phone.
Yeah, Pavlov would be laughing in his grave.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It is an eye-opening experience. It's, every time, you scroll through social media, you hear that ding, you get a like, you read a political post you agree with, or, you know what I mean? Anytime you get that notification, you're gonna get a hit of dopamine, and you've really, again, it's gotten so easy to get them in our, we got them sitting in our pockets all the time. The first all right. Every addiction, no matter what it is, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, video games, food, whatever it is, they all have one thing in common. The addicted person plays a mental movie that ends with them getting their fix. Right? And so the first thing I always do is I'll have them expand that mental movie to see the consequences. If it's phone usage or something like that, we'll travel 10, 20 years in the future to see the rest of their lives to where they're still addicted to that phone, feeling like, crap and, feeling empty and all alone, still glued to a screen. You know what I mean? When you change that mental movie, the answer to, do I really want to look at my phone again, will start to change. Right, and beyond that, there's I have a hypnosis that will, help them associate some level of disgust uh, to the apps and all that, the social media. Right, right, yeah, and you mentioned this, this is a great question. There's some self-worth that plays into that because what happens is when you're scrolling social media all day, you're seeing everybody's highlight reels, you know what I mean? Think about when you put something on Instagram, "Oh, I gotta get the angle just right," and all this, everybody paints a picture that's way better than what their life really is, you know what I mean? And when you're looking at everybody else's highlight reels all day long, you think, "Oh, man, my life is, not that good." So you're down on yourself, and so there's a lot of self-worth that plays into that. So before I, do the addiction, hypnosis, I always have them run through hypnosis called I'm Enough, where, you get past that whole, self-worth issue and all that. We clear that, then we're ready to clear the addiction. But yeah, it is a huge, huge epidemic right now. And I agree with you. I think we're, coming to a pass here. We're going to have to do something.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad there's people like you out there helping people because everybody kind of needs it. And I when I talk about this stuff, I also say, I'm guilty of it too. We've all been duped. We literally are. You talked about an army of nerds, and that's like we know from the Facebook files that it's an army of like clinical PhD holding psychologists who said, "Hey, here's how you hijack people's brain. Here's how you steal their dopamine. And the number one most important currency on the planet right now is our attention and time, because
Yep.
that's how these companies get paid. And they're making
Yep.
billions off of every single screen in every kid's pocket and every adult's too. We got to see the rise of the internet, but it doesn't mean that we're not susceptible to it, right? It's like, so the irony is, the self-worth thing, right? All of us are going to have days where our guards down a little bit. We are already maybe depleted a little bit. And so we can allow negative thoughts because we're all human, and we do the comparison thing or even the smallest little, oh God, a little comment like that because you saw something or you read something, and then jealousy and then envy. And then those of us who are a little bit more in tune with that and aware of it, we look at it and go, oh, that's interesting. Why did I feel like that? Well, it's because of this, that, and the other. But we'll spend our time trying to figure it out because we want a reason. We want a reason. We have to attribute that behavior to something. Most of it's subconscious when we're not prepared, but even when we are, we'll try to attribute it to something else, right? So now you've got your own stuff. And then the irony, like I said, is hey, you run your own business, you run yours, I run mine, and we need it. Right? We need it. Like I need to create posts on social media. I need to create launch links. I need to do that because I know vast majority of the world is on there, and that's where you're going to get people to see your stuff and maybe reach out and all those sorts of things. So there's this really interesting balance that is required, and I think we can both agree that it's not going anywhere. Technology is here. You can't put the genie back in the lamp, right? So if you can't, what kind of steps do we need to take to keep ourselves safe and use it in a responsible, balanced, empowering way, as opposed to allowing it to completely take over our lives?
Great question. Step one is turn off notifications for everything but like emergencies. You know what I mean? Or, you are a real estate agent and you need, that notification to come through. If we're talking about like revenue generating activities or how your kids would communicate to you in an emergency, keep those notifications on. But you don't need notifications from Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, if you notice every app you install now, you install, Dairy Queen or McDonald's app, the first thing it says is, let me send you notifications. You hear that ding, you have to check it, right? And they know they can interrupt whatever it is you're doing, take control of your brain in those moments and, get you to buy more by doing that. Why they give discounts on their apps and all that kind of stuff. Um, Turn those notifications off as much as possible, and so you control when you're using your phone. Um, Another thing that I do is I'll take my phone and I started out by putting it across the room from me in my office. So if it dinged or something like I had to actually physically get up and go check it. That is a strange experience when you first start doing this, but I yeah, yeah, but, I got to the point where, alright, I can have it next to me and just put it in, one of my desk drawers, and so it's right there next to me, but I don't, I don't get that urge to check it because it's not sitting right there, it's not in my field of vision. I did that. I had my screen time under 15 minutes for over a year when I first started doing that, and I got to the point where I needed to start making content, and so I started getting on Facebook, and I started getting sucked right back in those same associations, that same, Oh, I gotta check it again. I got hijacked by it too, and I'm a hypnotist. So I can relate to the struggle. I definitely can. Yeah, like I said, these guys are really, really good. And so again, I would say, set a goal for your screen time, schedule it. When am I gonna do this? And if you use your brain a lot during the day, then schedule it for a time after that. You don't need so you've got your full brain power available. But, just being smart, having, you wanna stay tuned in and, you and I have teenagers, so we understand, their friends are all on Instagram and TikTok and all that, and if you're the ogre who limits their use, which I'm one of those, then, it's really hard. Yeah, yeah.
And people will fight for what they're addicted to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I was that for years, and my daughter just turned 18 not too long ago, and she told me, she's like, "Dad, now I understand why you did that. We were sitting there watching TV, and none of my friends could even make it through a full episode." She's like, "I was so mad at you, but now I understand why you did it." And you're the ogre for a while. You will be regardless during the teenage years, so no matter what you do. So, you might as well just, have those boundaries, you know what I mean? Figure out, what's healthy, but yeah, I know it's a tough, tough balance. I get it.
What's up, all you expressionists out there? Do you need reliable IT support and more for your business? SPJR Computer Consulting delivers comprehensive solutions tailored to small and medium-sized businesses. From seamless technical support to professional website design and effective online advertising, we keep your budget in mind. Don't miss out. Visit spjrsolutions.com today. That's spjrsolutions.com. Your business deserves the best. And you know what? It hurts, man. It does. Let's be really
Yeah.
honest, dude. Like, it hurts to watch somebody going through it and you know what's happening to them and they don't. And when you bring it up, they'll fight for it, like I said, because they're they have to, right? Essentially,
Yeah.
they have to, they must. Um, and so when you watch somebody who was very actively engaged and always social and was a part of the conversation, and then they start evolving into this addicted part of being on the phone all the time. It has to be DMs constantly. It has to be TikToks constantly. It has to be this constantly to where now you sit there to watch a TV show that we all decided upon and they're not watching. They're just on the phone. That hurts. And it's hard to say that that hurts to somebody because they will get defensive and be like, that's not personal. Well, and then all of a sudden, I'm not even going to watch TV with you anymore. I'm going to go and hide over here. And so it is so hard. And if you are a parent going through this, we all get that. The other part of it is, I love that you said that your daughter got to the point where she was able to say, and I see why you did that. And that's the one piece that I think parents need to remember. Parents need to remember that kids are always going to argue with you. They're always going to go through that developmental stage where they're trying to gain their own independence and they don't want to be held down by rules. And that's so normal. That's not new. But they also get to a place where we know that we're trying to create healthy adults and give them as best an opportunity as possible, doing the best we can. Well, sometimes it's hard for people to go backwards with the digital stuff these days because you are trying to be a model, but you have one too. And so adults get sucked in just as easily, right? But Melanie Hempy wrote Kids, Brains, and Screens, and her son Evan Hempy and his twin brother, their older brother was completely addicted to video games. And she was on the show a couple of episodes ago, and she said, we saw this growing and we didn't really know what to do, blah, 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 blah. He's not the same kind of person. So with our younger two, we did not let them have a phone or social media at all until they graduated from high school. So
Nice. Wow.
I had her son Evan on the show. My goodness, you can see the difference by talking to him than talking to almost any other teenager that's around right now. The guy is look you in the eyes, respectful, confident, can speak full sentences, and he will say that. He's like, at first it was hard, of course. We were different, we didn't understand it and whatever, but our friends started wanting to come to our house because they weren't allowed to use their phones and we'd all have to go do stuff. So they wanted to go play. And my parents always had stuff. trampolines and scooters and basketball hoops and blah, blah, blah. So we always had stuff to do. So everybody wanted to come over and do that. It's almost like they subconsciously wanted to get away from screens and do the things that our human body and brain in our experience expected period of time want to actually do, but they can't get away from the addicting thing that's in their face all the time.
Yeah, and adults struggle with that exact same thing, and, that's a great, great point. It's the more you can fill up their schedule with, social activity, sports, whatever that is, the more you can fill that schedule up and get them face to face with other human beings as opposed to doing it through a screen. You are doing them the biggest favor because they're going to be able to think for themselves. They're going to be able to actually look people in the eye. That is a huge, huge thing, especially since COVID, where people had really during COVID and the lockdowns and all that, people's comfort zone shrunk to their own house. And a lot of people are struggling getting back outside that. Very similar thing with the screens, that comfort zone. A lot of kids aren't comfortable talking to somebody face to face, which in the real world you're going to have to do at some point. And so yeah, it's again, it's I know it's tough and I sympathize, 1,000%, but you have to be the parent and you have to realize, take a look at your kid's behavior and, oh, they're not, their attention span is shot or, they're not getting out and doing things. So you got to kind of put some boundaries in there and that's, giving them some of what they want, some screen time or whatnot, but also saying, hey, this is how it's going to be. And, they will fight, tooth and nail, but yeah, that's gonna happen regardless.
Exactly.
So
That's the best reminder. Insert thing. It's going to happen.
yeah, exactly. My kids are extremely good at arguing. I don't know where they got that from, but but yeah, they can be extremely persuasive when they wanna be,
Yeah.
and
But
so,
we love them.
I
We
just
still see them as those
yeah,
little people, right? So we want to make them happy and not mad.
yeah,
We can't put the genie back in the bottle either. So we want to keep them in that place of
yeah,
love and all
yeah.
that stuff. But it's so hard because, you know, I think that, when you talk about the subconscious mind, right? So getting back to what you do and how you help people when they're going through it, because we all know everybody's going through it.
Yeah.
Um, so what it really comes down to is when you have a person in your life, maybe a youth, a teenager or whatever, and they do not understand why these rules are being implemented, and it's very different from all the friends and everybody they see around them. And when they don't understand why, how can parents communicate with them effectively to help them gain their own empowerment of, oh, I understand not only why you're doing it, but also why it's important, why I should be doing it. How can we cross that bridge?
Yeah, great point. One of the things that I do is I fill my kids' Instagram messenger with all this stuff about hey how this is hijacking your brain, and you've probably seen those memes where it's you got the thing stuck in the guy's face because they're looking at the phone or whatnot. Uh, my kids are so sick of seeing that stuff, but I'm talking to them on the platform that they want to be on and in their language, and they get it. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And
Can't
so
ignore it. You know that.
yeah, yeah. So that's a really good place to start. Meet them where they are, and where you can do that, they will at least understand that they'll understand deep down the concern that you have, and so they'll still fight. They're still gonna make tell you that you're the worst parent, and all my friends get to have unlimited screen time and all this stuff, but you just got to hold firm. And I got to the point where I had 3 different layers of security, the screen time limits, plus I had an app on there that monitored it, plus I had a router that's, limited what hours they could be on there. They would factory reset their phones and all kinds of stuffs, and so, "All right, you're not gonna see this for a week." You know what I mean? But, there gotta be a consequence anytime you break the rules,
You know
but,
what? That before you go on, that right there is huge. So when one of the things that's coming up a lot in this epidemic also is the amount of deceit that starts to build. And like we all can, like, if I gave you an image right now, you'll see it in your mind. I want you to imagine somebody who's addicted to meth and they are a family member that you care a lot about, and you keep giving them money, they keep disappearing for time, and then all of a sudden they're in your house, and now they start stealing from you.
Yeah.
That person would never have done that before, the person that you know, but their addiction is bigger than them. It's in the driver's seat, and now it's causing these behaviors. That should be a perfect tell when kids are starting to factory reset phones. They're not in the driver's seat. That's not them. That's not who they are. That's this need for that addictive quality, right? And so there's also kids that like, I hear this all the time when I was a social worker, especially kids who weren't allowed to have a phone or social media because of court issues and all this stuff with biological parents and blah, blah, blah. They would borrow someone's phone at school
Yep.
and create an account. And then all throughout school, they would just log in. So they basically had their own account whenever they wanted. They just had to borrow someone else's phone. And kids they'll hand it over no problem to their friends to make sure they could do that. Or they'll create a second account. Now, most kids have 2 or 3 accounts minimum. And one's a spam account, one's just for these friends. And now you're got all the craziness of I'm omitting these people. And they find out.
Yeah.
That's why the mental health stuff's going like this. But I just wanted to point that out. You make a really good point, and my kids did the same thing. They try every single thing they possibly could to make sure that they had access to what they wanted. They would log in somewhere else. They would one of my kids stole a phone. His sister's old one, she just didn't know where it was, thought she lost it, so we had to get her a new one. He had it the whole time. Like that kind of stuff, they aren't like that. There's a need for it. So I appreciate that you said that because it's vulnerable stuff, and it doesn't mean that that's how they are. It's contextual.
Right. No, they're great kids. They really are. They're headstrong, and they think dad is crazy because I was the only person talking about this for years, and people are starting to catch up. But yeah, no, that is a really great point, and I love the exercise that you did with the meth addict and all that. Just you make a great NLP coach. But the I would like to paint a picture, in a similar vein, if I could. Matt, most parents have had the experience of, the teenager pulls away. You guys are, I'm too cool to hang out with you, for a few years. Most of us have had the experience of that kid coming back at some point. You know what I mean? I would like to paint the picture of that versus that kid still being addicted to that screen and they can't come back because they're still, sucked into that world, and you never have that connection with them again. You know what I mean? My oldest is, has come back to us, you know what I mean? She's a great kid. I mean, phenomenal. But she teenagers all do that, and I would be concerned about them if they didn't, you know what I mean? It's that aspersion of independence, they're just not very elegant about it yet. But it's, um, when they come back, it's really rewarding because 'cause they're like, "Yeah, you were right about, certain things." But if they're still stuck in that phone and all that, that's when you get the 30-year-old living in your basement. You know what I mean? You still don't have that connection with them, and you know what I mean? Those are the 2 futures you can create, so, choose wisely.
And you're right. It is it's so important to step back and go, it's not all doom and gloom, right?
Yeah, right,
It's not.
right.
And it is a very normal developmental period of time. So
Yeah,
they're going to do that stuff. But ultimately, what it really comes down to is we're the parents. It is our
yeah.
job to protect them. It is our job to tell them no sometimes, and that it's because I care about you. That's it. It's the bottom line. I have some wisdom in this life and some experience. And just because you don't see that, it doesn't mean it's not true. So someday you will thank me for this. And if you don't, that's okay too. But this is how it's going to be. And
I just had that conversation with my kid, with my youngest the other day. I'm like, "Someday I'm making him get a job, but, I told someday you're gonna thank me for this. I know it's not today, tomorrow's not looking good either, but, you will at some point." But
you also said it's rewarding when they come back, and it is, man. It really is. My 2 older kids my daughter's gonna be 24 next month. My son just turned 22 last month, and then I've got my 10-year-old, like I told you. But those 2, they went through absolute hell when they were in high school because they were in there the COVID years. My daughter was a senior, my son was a junior, and that was March 2020. He lost all the sports, she lost theater and or graduation, and like it set their adult lives on a path that none of us could have ever predicted. Well, during that time, what made it even worse was the whole world said, well, you're going to do everything through a screen: work, school, play, friends, all of it. And that's how it's going to work. So we compounded the issue in this really bizarre time when we were all just trying to do our best to survive. And that did not do anybody any favors. So now turn around and say, okay, now let me take that away from you. It's like unheard of. So in their defense, they need the help and they know it half the time. But when they do come back and they come back around and they want to spend time with you, they want to put the phone away and play board games. They want to go hiking and go do things, and it's like, wow, that's really cool. They don't need that all the time. In fact, they want something else. You just have to be watching for those signs and be receptive, and then grab onto it when you get that chance. And that's hard. Parents are busy. It's expensive to live. Most people are working two jobs, so kudos to that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, and same. It's, it's keeping that connection open, even when, they're telling you, how horrible you are. It's still just, you when they, emotionally, when they, go off the rails, you just stay calm, and this how it's gonna be. And, by doing that, you kinda become their calm in the storm, you know what I mean? Teenage years are not easy. They never are for anybody. And, it's even, they'll never admit it to you during those times, but, they need that soft place to fall still, even if they don't, if they don't verbalize it.
Yes, exactly. And when you do hypnosis, you talked about your business and how you help people in that regard. I don't know if you have this or if this is even a really appropriate question to ask, but I'm just curious about like um success rate and like how long it takes people to go through a process like they do when they work with you, and what kind of timeline are we talking? Do people need to be ready to get on board for a minimum of a year? Or is it just like therapy where like you just should embark on this for the rest of your life so you can keep staying in touch with it? Or is there a finite? Well, tell me about that.
I don't mean to brag, but the vast majority of time it's one and done. I'll give you an example of that. My intro to hypnosis, I was a kid and my dad smoked a pack a day for over 30 years. Tried over and over again to quit. Pills, patches, gums, you name it. Failed every single time until he got hypnotized. After one hypnosis session, he never even craved cigarettes again. Uh, how did one, 30-minute hypnosis session wipe out one of the toughest addictions there is when everything else failed? It's because, it was dealing with those subconscious programs where they lie, that 95% behind the wheel. And I mean, that's the power of this stuff. It's, there are certain times, I've had, that same addiction thing that I do for social media, I've done for lots of other addictions. And there are some that are really, really ingrained, something, somebody's been doing for decades and, things like that. I have had to go back and, redo a session or two, but that's usually because we missed a trigger or something like that, or it's a pattern that's really, really ingrained. But the vast majority of time, it's, one and done for, and like I mentioned with the social media, there's the addiction part, there's the self-worth part, there could be, some, emotional stuff going on underneath the surface. So we got to deal with those one by one. You know what I mean? But it's usually for whatever that issue is, it's fairly rare to have to go back and redo it.
Wow, man. How long is a session?
It depends. For just like the addiction or something like that, if we're doing, the addiction plus the self-worth, which I almost always do, because that gives you the fortitude to, not have that FOMO. And, but, I mean, you're still looking at like an hour, probably, half hour each, something like
Oh,
that.
man, that
But,
doesn't seem
it's
like
not.
long.
I have other processes I do that are much more involved, but, it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, hypnosis is in general, I think, well, I'll just be honest with you. Like when I think of hypnosis, okay, I live in a small town, and like every year at the fair, there would be a hypnotist and bring people
Yeah.
up on stage and then hypnotize them all. And then they would all walk around and talk about how I wasn't really hypnotized, but some people were and they did stuff. And like there was all this conversation about, well, that's because their subconscious mind wanted to be hypnotized or blah, blah, blah. I know that
Yeah.
that is the cliche on the surface stuff. I'm aware that hypnosis is a real thing, of course, and neuroscientists have vouched for it for a very long time. So my question is, if we were trying to tell somebody, the layman, this is what it actually is and how it works, so that they would break down that cliche or that fear of, I don't want someone swinging a watch in front of their eyes and saying you're getting sleepy kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
make 'em
Like what,
cluck
how
like
do
a
you,
chicken. Yeah.
yeah, how do you elevator pitch this thing to where people go, oh, okay, I understand what you're talking about and how it works?
Yeah. Alright, I would ask you the question, have you ever had a movie move you emotionally? Some people cry at movies or they'll feel empowered or whatnot. You were hypnotized. It is, if you think about, alright, what happened? Was it the theater being cold or, the smell of the popcorn that made you cry? No. You got absorbed in the experience, and you had a continually narrowing focus of attention. That plus an alpha brainwave state, which they give you, it's just a slowed down, chilled out, state. Those together are the definition of a hypnotic trance. It is the exact same mechanism. It's just it's a much shallower one than what I do, but it's the exact same mechanism. Same thing with driving. You get road hypnosis. If you've ever driven a really long time and you just get that zoned out, that is a hypnotic trance. You're actually going in and out of them all the time. There's not a day that goes by that you don't go into them. It's just most of them are just very shallow. Out as far as the fair guy and maybe making people go around cluck like chickens. If you watch what they do, this is most people's introduction to hypnosis. They will bring people up on stage and they'll put them under and they're looking for, suggestibility, depth of trance like any hypnotist would, but they're also being very playful with them and they're seeing who plays back. They're looking for who wants to entertain the audience, and those are the ones that they keep, right? Those people know what they're doing, okay? And you never lose the ability to accept or reject any suggestion given. That ability is there with you no matter how deep you go. You always have your wits about you, you're always in line with your values. I would argue more so because we've gotten all your crap out of the way, but you are always in control when you're under hypnosis.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for that very clear definition. And I mean, my mind
I've had to
automatically started.
explain it a few times, that's why it's so clear.
Yeah, well, exactly. I figured you'd probably heard that before. And one of the things I was thinking when you were talking was like, I've always been a super emotional person when it comes to movies. I can get sucked into a Hallmark commercial like that. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Just I'll buy in to any of it. And I can always trace that back to my own ADHD, and I can trace it back to other things about selective attention and unintentional blindness, like you're talking about, which is very similar to the driving hypnosis type of thing. And so even knowing that stuff, it's still remarkable to like look at yourself from the outside and go, "Oh my gosh, I do that all the time," kind of a thing. So it is nice to have that analogy because that is so mainstream, normal. It's part of being a human being in the 21st century. It's like, oh, everybody's watched a movie. Everybody can listen to music sometimes and like feel the music to the point of emotion and stuff like that. So that seems like a very risk-free, low risk definition of what the lowest surface level of hypnosis can be, which makes it not so scary, which, one of the things about therapy and all this kind of stuff for years has been the stigma around it, right? Like
Mhm,
I
yeah.
don't want you driving around in my brain car here and I don't have any control. I'm like some zombie. No, of course that's not what it is.
Couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah, you're always under control. Yeah, we're just we're making the unconscious conscious and allowing you to rewrite those programs. Like I'll always, I leave it open as much as I can. Pick a belief you'd want to change or a habit you'd like to change. You know what I mean? And I leave you in the driver's seat always. But it's if you think about in the human lifespan, ages 0 to 7 are what's called the imprinting phase. That's when you take in huge amounts of data, you form your self-concept, but you don't have the ability to, judge anything that's coming in. That is called your critical faculty, you haven't developed it yet. And so you just accept things for what they are, and you come to a lot of false conclusions about yourself. Kids are notorious for blaming themselves for things they have no control over. Mom and dad are fighting. I must have done something wrong. You know what I mean? And the irony is, as adults, we have all the control, but we take none of the responsibility. You know what I mean? But But, it during those phases, during those years, 0 to 7, most of the time you were in what's called an alpha brainwave phase, which means you were hypnotized that entire time. That's part of the reason why hypnosis is so effective is because 'cause we're putting you back in that same brainwave state you were in when you picked up all your crap, if that makes sense.
It does, man. And on top of that, it's like, this goes a lot. This goes hand in hand with a lot of different theories. It goes hand in hand with like information processing models with 3 box memory and all that stuff. It goes hand in hand with, you know, um, cognitive development theorists and stuff like that that talk about, how there's a reason why we don't remember like several years of our first beginning years of life. And there's a reason why, like, if you think back to your childhood now, you could probably pick 5 or 6 moments that, but otherwise, like, you don't remember the minutia of every single day of 5th grade. You don't remember the minutia of every day of 3rd grade, but you might remember that teacher. And then you'll start to piece some little memories of who was in that class. And then maybe some stuff that happened that year. Maybe.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like all the other stuff, the personal stuff, like you just take it on. And that's one of the biggest reasons why therapy and this kind of work is so critical is because you just become an adult and that kid lives in there still. And so now it's shaping every decision you make when you're trying to raise your own kids. And there's a guilt that goes with that sometimes. And so you have to kind of work through some stuff that's not easy to even talk about half the time. So I'm glad that you're there to
Yeah.
help with that stuff, man.
Thank you, thank you. One of the biggest, or one of the big things that I do with people is called timeline therapy, and timeline is just how your subconscious processes time. So there was a time before you knew what anger was, or sadness, or negative emotions. We go back to those points before you picked up before you learned what those emotions were. We look at those events and, I always tell people to go back to the very first one, but they always go back to the one that really means the most, and we look at those with an adult toolkit, and people will get some, I mean, just really profound stuff. I thought my mother disapproved of me, but really she was just mad at her whole situation, things like that, and it totally changes their self-concept. It's incredible experience, but those memories are all in there and they're all affecting you. It's just like the driving you're not thinking about, you know what I mean? They're still playing under there. And so when you go in and again make them conscious again, we can rewrite them, take the sting out of them, and all that. And that it is a really really freeing experience.
Wow, man. I think I'm gonna have to hit you up and do this. Oh man, I'm like, I've got stuff I gotta think about, man, because now I'm like, I've tried pretty much everything else, so I really should think about this.
I have succeeded where many others have failed. Yeah,
That's right. Hey, you know what? I know that I'll try almost any sort of therapeutic method at least once, because
yeah,
I'm pretty in tune with the fact that, oh, this happened and this is this, and that I'm acting out because of that. Okay. So that's good. But I also can still recognize the times when I'm like, ooh, we're having a bad day. I need to work
yeah,
hard to get out of this right now. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes it can carry you all day and you can know it and still not be able to change it sometimes. And that almost makes it worse. Yeah, like, and so I know that
well,
that's controllable.
that yeah, yeah. If you look at that, if you've ever seen that cartoon movie Inside Out, whoever wrote that movie had a really good NLP person on board. I know the model they were working from, but, it's whenever as a kid, whenever you saw your parents have a reaction to some situation, it got filed away as a reaction, good, bad, indifferent, subconscious doesn't care. It's like, "All right, this is a reaction to that situation." Most of us as adults have had the horrifying experience of having our parents' words come out of our mouths, right? That's what's going on. that stuff got filed away as, oh, this is a reaction to this situation. When your subconscious spots something similar, it's like, oh, here's a reaction. And it doesn't matter if it's good or appropriate or whatnot. It runs with it. And so it sounds like that might be some of what's going on.
Yeah, man. Oh gosh, you just talking to you actually makes me feel good about a lot of things because you say it the right thing. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that makes total
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Oh man, Matt, this has been outstanding. Yeah, go 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 go.
I truly believe all behavior has a positive intent at some level, and that could be to protect you or something like that. And even the really negative stuff, but there you can always find a positive intent at some level.
Yeah, and I mean, like evolutionary psychologists will tell you, ultimately, if we really strip this thing down, we are a species of animal, and all species
Yeah.
of animals have
Yep.
one main instinctual job, and that is to reproduce and make sure that our line continues for survival. And when you think about how each individual entity inside that species is wired, it's for survival. So let's go ahead and take the leap and say that our behavior and our thought processes, those are all designed to protect us so that we can survive. I mean, there's some obvious stuff in these building blocks, but you can't see the forest through the trees all the time. So you have to find the language that helps people go, oh, that's the way that clicks for me. Okay, I do understand now. Because depending on what language you're speaking in those terms, it could just be here or it can land. And so I think you probably do a really good job. No wonder you're a one and done success rate kind of guy, man. You're a good communicator, dude.
Thank you. It didn't happen overnight, but
Of course, I know, right? My daughter's like, oh, you're so good at saying stuff like that. I'm like, well, I've had a lot of practice, and
yeah.
you know what I mean? It didn't happen overnight is probably the truest statement we can say. But, man, I'm so grateful for your time today, Matt. I know I kept you a long time, but I was really enjoying our conversation. So is there anything I didn't mention or that you would like to add before we wrap things up here?
Yeah, you only get so many trips around the sun, and so think forward to when you're 95 years old and sitting in your rocking chair, looking back at your life. How do you want it to look? And just start to reverse engineer it from there. What do I need to do? Today, this week, this month, this year, to make that life a reality, and then just get to work. Use those 2 millimeters, and fun gets done. But again, you get to pick. How you spend those years. And I highly encourage people to, get off their phone and, get in that driver's seat.
Oh, man. Yes. I'm going to just cut that. I'm going to just cut that little piece right there. Boom. Highlight reel, baby.
There's your
Thank
kid.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Ironic. I'm already creating a highlight reel. Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate everything. Do you have a website people could go to if we want to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Oh, yeah. It's mattjohnsonnlp.com. That's MattJohnsson, and then NLP for neuro linguistic programming.com.
Awesome, man. I'm definitely going to be checking that out and sharing this with others. So I really appreciate your time today. And let's keep in touch. Maybe we could do a follow-up sometime and see how things are going down there. And next time in San Diego.
Yeah, well, hook it up, man. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, brother. No worries. Thank you.